The rain in Nairobi does not ask for permission. It simply arrives, turning the dust of the city into a thick, red slurry that clings to everything. It was pounding against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my corner office on the 25th floor of the Prism Tower in Upper Hill. From up here, the chaos of the city looked silent, almost peaceful. The headlights of the Matatus and cars on Gong Road were just strings of red and white beads, moving slowly through the deluge. I turned away from the view, checking my reflection in the dark glass. My name is Jabali Mwangi. To the business magazines, I am the titan of trade, the man who turned a small transport business into a logistics empire that spans East Africa. To my employees, I am the Iron Man, hard, unbending, and cold. I adjusted the cuffs of my Italian silk suit. It was gray, the color of a storm clouds. Fitting. Sir, the merger documents are ready for your signature, my personal assistant Clara said. She stood by the heavy mahogany door, clutching a folder as if it were a shield. She was terrified of me. They all were. Leave them on the desk, Clara, I said, my voice low. And tell the driver to bring the car around. I am done for the day. Yes, Mr. Mwangi. Right away. She placed the folder down gently as if afraid the desk might bite her and hurried out. I sighed, walking over to the desk. It was massive, empty except for a sleek laptop and a single framed photograph. The photo was not of a wife or children. It was a picture of my late mother, God rest her soul. She was the only woman who had ever loved me without conditions. The rest? They only loved what I could give them. I signed the papers without reading the fine print. I didn't need to. I had written the terms myself. I always won. That was the rule of my life. Jabali wins. But as I capped my gold fountain pen, a familiar hollowness echoed in my chest. I was 52 years old. I had billions in the bank. I had houses in Mombasa, apartments in London, and this tower in the sky. But I was going home to an empty mansion in Karen where the only voice that greeted me was the hum of the refrigerator. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the private elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing me in a golden box, whisking me down to the basement parking. The air in the garage was damp and smelled of exhaust and wet concrete. My driver, Amani, a burly man who had been with me for 10 years, was waiting by the back door of the black Mercedes S-Class. He held a large black umbrella open, ready to shield me from the spray that blew in through the open garage vents. Good evening, boss, Amani rumbled. Evening, Amani. Let's go. I want to beat the worst of the traffic on Uhuru Highway. I slid into the back seat. The leather was soft, smelling of luxury and isolation. The doors locked with a heavy thud, shutting out the world. As we ascended the ramp and merged onto the wet streets, I pulled out my tablet to check the stock markets in New York. We moved slowly. The rain had caused a gridlock. Hawkers were weaving between the cars, selling umbrellas, windscreen wipers, and groundnuts. I watched them with a detached curiosity. I remembered being hungry. I remembered the bite of the cold. But that was 30 years ago, a lifetime away. Now I was safe behind bulletproof glass. We were stopped at a traffic light near the Westlands roundabout when I saw the commotion. Security guards from a nearby office complex were shouting. A small figure was darting between the stopped cars, banging on windows. It wasn't a hawker. It looked like a child or a very small woman drenched to the bone. Her clothes were oversized, a faded t-shirt that hung off her shoulders and a skirt that dragged in the mud. Lock the doors, Amani, I said instinctively. Nairobi streets could be unpredictable. They're locked, boss. Just a street kid, Amani said, gripping the steering wheel. The figure moved closer. I saw her face illuminated by the headlights of the car behind us. She was young, perhaps 18 or 19, but malnutrition had stunted her, making her look much younger. Her hair was plastered to her skull by the rain. She was shivering so violently that her teeth chattered, but her eyes, wide, dark, and desperate, were scanning every car. She locked eyes with me. For a second, my heart skipped a beat. It was a strange sensation, like a memory trying to surface from deep underwater. There was something about the shape of her eyes, the arch of her brow, that felt incredibly familiar. She lunged toward my car. Boss. Amani shouted, honking the horn. She didn't care. She threw herself against the passenger window. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't have a sign asking for money. She pressed her palms against the glass. They were small, dirty hands. I could hear her muffled voice through the thick glass. She wasn't screaming for cash. She was screaming words I didn't expect. Work. Please. Work. I stared at her. Usually they asked for chai, for tea money, for a handout. This girl was begging for a job in the middle of a monsoon. Drive, Amani, I commanded, though my voice lacked its usual steel. The light is green. She is blocking the way, sir. The girl saw my hesitation. She clasped her hands together in a prayer motion, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Sir, please. I will clean. I will carry. My mother is dying. Please. The raw agony in her face unsettled me. It cracked the armor I wore so tightly. But I was a busy man. I couldn't save everyone in Nairobi. If I open this window, I open the floodgates. Just inch forward. She will move, I said, looking away, focusing on my tablet again. Don't hurt her, just nudge the car. Amani eased the foot off the brake. The massive engine purred. The car crept forward. The girl scrambled back, slipping in the mud, barely missing the tire. She fell hard onto her knees in the red slush. I looked back through the rear window as we pulled away. She was still on her knees in the rain, head bowed, shoulders shaking. A pang of guilt, sharp and hot, pierced my chest. I shook it off. You are Jabali, I told myself. You are a rock. You cannot crumble for every sad story. The drive to Karen took another hour. By the time we passed through the heavy iron gates of my estate, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The house was a palace. White stone, pillars, manicured gardens that cost more to maintain than most people earned in a decade. I entered the foyer. It was silent. My housekeeper, Mrs. Amani, had already left for the day. Dinner was likely in the warmer in the kitchen. I ate alone at the head of a dining table that seated 12. The silence was deafening. I thought of the girl in the rain. My mother is dying, she had mouthed. I pushed my plate away. I had lost my appetite. I went to my study and poured a glass of whiskey. I stood by the window looking out at the dark garden. Why did her face bother me? It wasn't just pity. It was recognition. It was as if a ghost had walked across my grave. I went to bed, but sleep was elusive. I tossed and turned under the high thread count sheets. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her hands pressed against the glass. The next morning, the sun was out, mocking the gloom of the previous night. I dressed in a navy suit, drank my black coffee, and prepared for war. Today I had a board meeting with the shareholders. They wanted to cut costs. I wanted to expand. It would be a fight. Amani was waiting. The car was freshly washed, no trace of the mud from the night before. Good morning, boss. Morning, Amani. Let's go. We drove out of the estate. The morning traffic was heavy, the air filled with the smell of roasting maize and diesel. As we approached the same roundabout in Westlands where we had been stopped the night before, I found myself scanning the roadside. I told myself I wasn't looking for her. I told myself I was just checking the traffic flow. But there she was. She was sitting on a concrete barrier, her head resting on her knees. She looked worse than before. Her clothes were dry but stained with red mud. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept. Stop the car, I said. Amani looked at me in the rearview mirror, surprised. Sir? Here. Ideally, we shouldn't stop in this. I said stop the car, Amani. He pulled over to the shoulder, engaging the hazards. The girl lifted her head. When she saw the black Mercedes, recognition flashed in her eyes. She didn't run to us this time. She stood up slowly, swaying slightly. She looked like she might faint. I lowered the window. The noise of the city rushed in, horns, shouting, engines. You, I called out. She froze. She pointed a trembling finger at her own chest. Me? Yes. Come here. She approached cautiously, like a stray dog expecting a kick. When she got close, I smelled the sickness on her, the scent of poverty, of unwashed clothes and desperation. But beneath it, she had a fierce dignity. She held her chin up. You were begging for work yesterday, I said. Yes, sir. Her voice was raspy. I'm strong. I can work. I don't want free money. I need to pay the hospital. What is your name? Amani, sir. Amani. An ironic name for a girl whose life seemed to be a war zone. And why do you think a man like me would hire a girl like you, Amani? I asked, testing her. I wanted to see if she would break. She gripped the doorframe of the car. Her knuckles were white. Because you looked back, she said softly. Yesterday. You looked back. The others, they don't look. They just roll up the window. You have a heart, sir. I can see it. Even if you hide it. Her words struck me like a physical blow. She saw me. My mother. She continued, her voice breaking. She is at Kenyatta National Hospital. They will stop treating her today if I don't pay something. Anything. Please, sir. I will wash your car. I will clean your toilets. I will do anything. I looked at my watch. I was going to be late for the board meeting. But I looked at Amani, and I saw a fire that reminded me of myself at 20, before the world turned me cold. "Get in," I said. Amani turned around, eyes wide. "Boss?" I said. "Get in the front seat, Amani." She stood there stunned. Inside. "Unless you want to run behind the car," I snapped, my patience thinning. "Get in before I change my mind." She opened the passenger door with shaking hands and sat next to Amani. She sat on the edge of the seat, terrified of dirtying the leather. She smelled of rain and earth. "Drive to the office, Amani," I ordered. "Then call the housekeeper. Tell her we have a new assistant cleaner." Amani turned in her seat to look at me in the back. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Thank you, sir. Thank you. God bless you. You have saved my life." "Don't thank me yet," I grumbled, opening my laptop to create a barrier between us. "You haven't done any work yet. I demand perfection, Amani. If you are lazy, you are gone. Understood?" "I'm not lazy, sir. I promise." We drove in silence for a while. I tried to focus on my emails, but I kept glancing at the back of her head. Her hair was messy, natural, pulled back into a rough puff. "What is wrong with your mother?" I asked, not looking up from the screen. "It is her kidneys, sir," Amani said softly. "She has been sick for a long time. Since my father left us." "Your father left?" "Before I was born. Mama says he was a great man, but he had a different destiny. She never speaks ill of him, even though we suffered." A strange tightness gripped my throat. A woman who never spoke ill of a man who abandoned her? That was rare. Most women I knew would have cursed his name to the heavens. "She sounds like a good woman," I said. "She is an angel, sir. She used to be a singer. She has the most beautiful voice. She used to sing in the clubs in Mombasa before she got sick." My fingers froze over the keyboard. Mombasa. A singer. The air in the car suddenly felt very thin. I couldn't breathe properly. My mind raced back 20 years. To the humid nights at the coast. To a small jazz club near the ocean. To a woman with skin like copper and a voice like velvet. I had left her. I had to choose between her and the deal that made my first million. I chose the money. I walked away without a word, changing my number, erasing my past to build my future. Her name was etched into my soul, a scar I never touched. "What is your mother's name, Amani?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, hollow, as if it were coming from someone else. Amani turned around again. She looked at me with those eyes that I now realized were not just familiar. They were my eyes. "Her name is Zuri," Amani said. "Zuri Hassan." The world stopped. The noise of the traffic faded into a high-pitched ring in my ears. The tablet slipped from my fingers and fell onto the floor of the car with a clatter. Zuri. It couldn't be. I looked at the girl, at Amani, with new terror and fascination. She was 19. "I left Zuri 20 years ago." "Sir? Are you okay?" Amani asked, concern flooding her face. I couldn't speak. I stared at her, and for the first time in 20 years, the great Jabali Mwangi was afraid. The tablet lay on the floor mat of the Mercedes, its screen glowing in the dim light of the car's interior. I stared at it, but my mind was miles away, lost in a time loop that had snapped me back 20 years. Zuri Hassan. The name echoed in the silence of the car, louder than the engine, louder than the chaotic Nairobi traffic outside. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a sensation I hadn't felt since I was a young man negotiating my first high-risk deal. But this was not business. This was a ghost story coming to life. "Sir?" Amani's voice cut through the fog. She was twisted around in the front seat, her eyes wide with worry. "You look pale. Do you need water?" I blinked, forcing the mask of the Iron Man back into place. It was a struggle. My hands were trembling slightly, so I clenched them into fists on my lap. I couldn't let this girl, this child who might be my own flesh and blood, see me unravel. "I am fine," I said, my voice gruff. I picked up the tablet and placed it on the seat beside me. Just a momentary dizzy spell. "Turn around, Amani. We are arriving." Amani pulled the car into the underground parking of Prism Tower. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed. He knew me better than anyone. He knew I didn't get dizzy spells. But he was a good soldier. He said nothing. As we stepped out of the car, the stark fluorescent lights of the garage highlighted Amani's condition. Her oversized t-shirt was stained, her skirt hem caked with drying mud. Her shoes were cheap plastic sandals, worn thin at the heels. Standing next to my polished Mercedes in my bespoke suit, she looked like a creature from another world. "Follow me," I commanded. We walked to the elevator. The security guard, A man named Juma, who usually greeted me with a crisp salute, stared open-mouthed at the girl trailing behind me. Mr. Mwangi? Juma started, stepping forward as if to intercept a threat. She is with me, Juma, I said, cutting him off with a sharp look. She is my new intern. Intern? Yes, sir. Juma stepped back, confused but obedient. We rode the elevator in silence. I watched her reflection in the gold-plated doors. She was hugging herself, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. She looked at the buttons, the lights, the polished mirrors. Then she looked at me. Is this your house? She whispered. No. This is my office, I said. My house is much quieter. The doors opened on the 25th floor. Clara was at her desk, typing furiously. When she saw us, she stopped. Her eyes traveled from my face to Amani's muddy sandals. Mr. Mwangi? Clara stood up, adjusting her glasses. You're early. And who is this? This is Amani, I said, walking past her toward my office door. She will be helping with general duties. Cleaning, organizing. Find her a uniform, Clara. Something from the janitorial stock, but make sure it is new. And order breakfast. Heavy breakfast. Eggs, sausages, toast, tea. Lots of tea. Clara looked at Amani, who was shrinking back, trying to make herself invisible. For her? Clara asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. Yes, for her. And Clara? I paused at my door. Treat her with the same respect you show me. Is that clear? Clara stiffened. Yes, sir. Crystal clear. I ushered Amani into my office. She stood by the door, afraid to step onto the plush Persian rug. Sit. I pointed to the leather chair opposite my desk. I will dirty it, sir. I can buy 1,000 chairs. Sit. She sat on the very edge, her hands tucked between her knees. I went to my desk, but I didn't sit. I couldn't. I paced to the window, looking out at the skyline. The sun was fully up now, burning off the morning mist. I needed to know. I needed to know if the timeline fit. The math worked. Amani, I said, keeping my back to her. You said you were 19? Yes, sir. I turned 19 last month. 19. I closed my eyes. I left Mombasa 20 years ago. Zuri and I had been together for 2 intense, passionate years before that. She was pregnant when I left. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I had left without a goodbye. I had left a note and a stack of cash on the bedside table while she slept. I was a coward. I told myself I was doing it for us, that I needed to go to Nairobi to build a fortune, and that I would send for her. But once I got here, the city swallowed me. I became obsessed with success. I met other women, women with connections, women who didn't smell of the ocean and cheap perfume. I stopped calling. Eventually, the number I had for her was disconnected. And your father? I asked, turning to face her. Your mother never told you his name? Amani shook her head. No, sir. She calls him the ghost. She says he was a man who wanted to fly and we were just anchors. The word stung. Anchors? Is that how Zuri thought I saw them? She sounds like a wise woman, I choked out. She is sick, sir. Very sick. Amani's voice trembled. You said I could work? I need to go to the hospital later. The doctors said they need 50,000 shillings by noon or they will move her to the general ward hallway. She can't survive in the hallway, sir. It's too cold. 50,000 shillings. It was what I spent on a single bottle of scotch. For her, it was life or death. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my checkbook. Then I stopped. A check would take days to clear. She needed cash. I reached into the safe built into the credenza behind my desk. I punched in the code and the heavy door hissed open. I grabbed a stack of notes. I walked over to Amani and held out the bundle. Here, I said. She looked at the money, then at me. Her eyes widened. Sir? This is too much. It is 100,000 shillings, I said. Consider it an advance on your salary for the next 3 months. 100,000? She gasped, pulling her hands back as if the money were on fire. I cannot take that. I haven't scrubbed a single floor yet. I haven't earned it. Take it. I snapped, my voice louder than intended. She flinched. I softened my tone. Take it, Amani. Go to the hospital. Pay the bill. Get her the medicine she needs. Get yourself some food. Real food, not maize from the street. She reached out with trembling fingers and took the money. She held it to her chest and began to weep. Not the silent crying of the night before, but deep, heaving sobs of relief. Thank you, she choked out. Thank you. You are an angel sent by God. I will work so hard for you. I will work until my hands bleed. No bleeding, I said, feeling an uncomfortable lump in my throat. Just go. Go save your mother. And come back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. She fell to her knees, grabbing my hand before I could pull it away. She kissed my knuckles, her tears wetting my skin. Stand up, I said, pulling her up gently. We don't kneel in this office. Go. She nodded, wiping her face, and ran out of the office, clutching the money like it was the Holy Grail. When the door clicked shut, the silence rushed back in. I collapsed into my chair. I felt drained, aged. I hit the intercom button. Clara. Yes, Mr. Mwangi? Get me Kip 2 on the secure line. Now. Yes, sir. Kip 2 was a former intelligence officer who now ran the most discreet private investigation firm in Kenya. He was the man you called when you wanted to find a needle in a haystack, or when you wanted to bury the haystack. The phone rang once. Jabali, Kip 2's gravelly voice answered. It's been a while. Trouble? I need information, Kip 2. Fast. Name? Zuri Hassan. Approximately 40 years old. Originally from Mombasa, likely living in a low-income area in Nairobi now. She has a daughter named Amani, aged 19. There was a scratching sound of a pen on paper. Zuri Hassan. Okay. What are we looking for? Everything, I said, leaning forward, my forehead resting in my hand. Medical records. Financial history. And paternity of the child. Paternity, Kip 2 repeated. He paused. Is this personal, Jabali? Very. I'll have a preliminary report by tonight. Do you want me to run a DNA test if I can get a sample? No, I said quickly. Not yet. Just find out where she has been for the last 20 years. And Kip 2? This stays between us. If this leaks, I will destroy you. Understood. The line went dead. I spent the rest of the day in a haze. I sat in meetings, nodding at graphs and projections, but I saw nothing. I saw only the curve of Amani's jaw, which was exactly like my mother's. I saw the way she held her chin high despite her poverty. That was Zuri's pride. I left the office early at 4 p.m. Amani drove me home, sensing my mood and keeping the radio off. When I got to my mansion in Karen, the emptiness felt different today. Usually the silence was a comfort. Today it felt like a judgment. I walked through the grand hallway looking at the expensive art on the walls. It all felt meaningless. I went to the library, a room filled with books I rarely read. I went to a hidden drawer in an antique desk. A drawer I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside lay a single dried seashell. A cowrie shell. Zuri had given it to me on the beach in Diani the night we met. So you always remember the sound of the ocean, she had said. I held the shell to my ear. I heard nothing but the rush of my own blood. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Kip 2. My hand hovered over the phone. I was terrified. For a man who controlled billions, I was paralyzed by a single phone call. I picked it up. Tell me. It's an interesting case, Jabali, Kip 2 said, his voice void of emotion. Zuri Hassan. Moved to Nairobi 18 years ago. Works, or worked, as a cleaner in Eastleigh. Living in the slums of Mathar. It's bad, Jabali. Extreme poverty. I closed my eyes. And the illness? End-stage renal failure. She's been on dialysis for 2 years, but inconsistently because of the cost. The daughter, Amani, dropped out of school 2 years ago to work odd jobs to pay for it. Dropped out of school. My daughter, if she was mine, should be in university. She should be studying law or medicine in London or Boston. Instead, she was begging on the streets of Westlands. What about the father? I asked, dreading the answer. Birth certificate lists the father as unknown, Kip 2 said. But here is the interesting part. I pulled her phone records and old mail logs from a contact at the post office. And? She wrote letters, Jabali. To you. My breath hitched. To me? I never received a single letter. She sent them to your mother's address in Mombasa, the old family home. Every month for the first 5 years. Then sporadically after that. My mother, who had passed away 10 years ago. My mother, who had always told me that Zuri was trash, a distraction, who would ruin my potential. Did my mother receive them? She signed for the registered ones, Kip 2 said. And she sent one reply about 6 months after you left. A cease and desist letter prepared by a lawyer. It threatened Zuri with police action if she tried to contact you again. It claimed you wanted nothing to do with her or her bastard child. The phone almost slipped from my hand. My mother. The woman whose picture sat on my desk. The woman I revered. She had intercepted the truth. She had known I had a child. She had known Zuri was looking for me, and she had crushed them like insects to protect my career. "Are you there, Jabali?" "I'm here," I whispered, a wave of nausea rolling over me. "There is one more thing," Kiptu said. "I found a hospital record from when the child was born in Mombasa. It wasn't a cheap clinic. Zuri paid for a private room. The bill was paid in cash. The intake form has a note in the margin." "What does it say?" "It says, Father, Jabali Mwangi. Patient requests he not be contacted yet. Wants to surprise him." The line went silent. The truth washed over me cold and brutal. I had a daughter. I had a family. And for 19 years, they had suffered in the mud while I lived in a castle, all because of a lie I didn't even know was being told. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. I looked at the seashell in my hand. Then I threw it across the room. It shattered against the stone fireplace, exploding into white dust. I wasn't the Iron Man. I wasn't a Titan. I was a failure. But Zuri was dying. And Amani was trusting me. I grabbed my car keys. I didn't call Amani. I couldn't wait for him. I stormed out of the house into the night. I had to see her. I had to see Zuri. I didn't know what I would say, or if she would even look at me without spitting in my face. But as I revved the engine of the Mercedes, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Sir, this is Amani. I am at the hospital. The doctors took the money. Mama is awake. She is asking where I got it. I don't know what to tell her. She hates rich men. Please, what do I say?" I stared at the screen. If Zuri knew the money came from Jabali Mwangi, she might refuse the treatment. She might choose death over my charity. I typed back, "Tell her you got a job. Tell her your boss is a kind woman. Do not mention my name. I am coming." I peeled out of the driveway, the tires screeching against the pavement. I was going to the slums. I was going to the hospital. I was going into the heart of the storm I had created. Kenyatta National Hospital at night is a beast that never sleeps. It is a sprawling city of pain, smelling of antiseptic, boiled cabbage, and human sweat. I had never set foot inside it. My world was the Aga Khan or Nairobi Hospital, where silence was purchased with insurance cards that gleamed like gold. But here, in the heart of the public health system, the air was thick with the prayers of the desperate. I parked the Mercedes in a slot reserved for doctors, ignoring the guard who started to shout until I shoved a 1,000-shilling note into his hand. He saluted, his anger instantly dissolving into gratitude. That was the language of Nairobi. Money spoke and everyone listened. Except perhaps Zuri. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wasn't the Iron Man here. I was just a man in a suit that cost more than the annual salary of the nurses walking past me, terrified of a dying woman. I loosened my tie. I felt like I was choking. I texted Amani, "I am at the entrance. Where are you?" She replied instantly, "Ward 4B. Renal unit. It is crowded, sir. Please hurry." I moved through the corridors. The walls were painted appealing pale green. I passed benches filled with people sleeping, wrapped in shukas, waiting for news or waiting for morning. I saw a mother weeping silently into her hands. I saw a man staring blankly at the wall. Every face accused me. "Where were you?" they seemed to ask. "While you were building towers, we were dying here." I found Ward 4B. Amani was standing outside the double doors, hugging herself. She looked tiny. When she saw me, her face crumpled with relief. "Sir," she whispered, rushing to me. She stopped just short of hugging me, remembering the boundary between billionaire and beggar. "How is she?" I asked, my voice rough. "The dialysis has started. The doctor said, he said it was just in time. Her levels were fatal." She wiped her eyes. "But she is awake. She is suspicious, sir. She keeps asking who gave me the money." I told her it was my new boss, Mrs. Kinyanjui. "A kind lady." "Mrs. Kinyanjui," I repeated, tasting the lie. It was bitter. "Good. Stick to that." "But why are you here, sir?" Amani looked at me with confusion. "If she sees you, you are a man. A rich man. She will know I lied." I took a deep breath. "Tell her I am Mr. Kinyanjui's driver. Tell her I was sent to bring you food and make sure the payment went through. I need to see her, Amani. Please." Amani studied my face. She was young, but she had the intuition of a survivor. She saw something in my eyes, maybe the desperation, maybe the guilt. "Okay," she nodded slowly. "But please don't upset her. Her heart is weak too." She pushed the doors open. The ward was a long room packed with beds. There was no privacy, only thin curtains separating the sick. The sound of beeping monitors created a rhythmic, mechanical lullaby. The air was colder here, conditioned to keep germs at bay. Amani led me halfway down the room to a bed near the window. "Mama?" Amani called out softly. I stayed a few steps back, hidden by the shadow of a tall medical cart. "Amani," a voice replied. My knees nearly buckled. It was her. The voice was thinner, raspy like dry leaves dragging on concrete, but the timbre was the same. It was the voice that used to whisper my name in the dark. It was the voice that had sung jazz to the crashing waves of the Indian Ocean. "I am here, Mama," Amani said, stepping to the bedside. "Did you pay them?" Zuri asked. "The doctors, they stopped shouting at me." "Yes, Mama. My boss, Mrs. Kinyanjui. She gave me an advance. She is a saint, Mama. A true Christian woman." "A saint?" Zuri let out a weak, skeptical laugh. "Rich people are not saints, Amani. They are sharks. Why would she give you so much money? What does she want from you? Did she ask you to do things?" "No, Mama. She just wants me to clean. She saw I was crying. She has a daughter my age." I stepped out from the shadows. I couldn't hide anymore. I had to see her face. "Excuse me," I said, pitching my voice low and humble. "Good evening." The movement caught Zuri's eye. She turned her head on the pillow. Time stopped. 20 years vanished. She was gaunt. Her cheekbones, once high and elegant, were now sharp ridges under papery skin. Her eyes, once bright and full of fire, were sunken and yellowed. Tubes ran from her arm to a machine that hummed and clicked, cycling her blood. But despite the ruin of sickness, she was still Zuri. She still had that regal set to her jaw. She squinted at me. The harsh fluorescent light buzzed overhead. "Who is this?" she asked Amani, her eyes not leaving my face. "This is the driver," Amani stammered. "Mr. John. Mrs. Kinyanjui sent him to bring us some food." I held up a plastic bag I had grabbed from the car. It contained only bottled water and some biscuits I kept for emergencies, but it was a prop. "Pole na kazi, madam," I said, using the respectful Swahili greeting for someone suffering. "My boss sends her regards. She wants you to get well." Zuri stared at me. Her gaze was intense, piercing. She didn't look at the bag. She looked at my hands, then at my suit, then at my face. "John?" she whispered. "Yes, madam." "You wear a suit that costs more than this hospital to be a driver?" I froze. I had forgotten to take off the jacket. I had forgotten the gold cufflinks. "It is a uniform," I lied, sweat prickling my forehead. "The Kinyanjuis are very particular." Zuri closed her eyes for a moment, letting out a long, shuddering breath. "Amani," she said softly, "go to the nurse's station. Ask them for more water. The cold one." "But Mama, Mr. John brought." "Go, Amani." Zuri's voice rose, cracking with sudden intensity. Amani jumped. She looked from me to her mother, terrified. "Yes, Mama." She hurried away, her plastic sandals slapping against the linoleum floor. We were alone. The machine clicked. Whoosh click. Whoosh click. I stood there, feeling like a child caught stealing sugar. I wanted to run. I wanted to fall to my knees. Zuri opened her eyes. They were wet now. "Jabali," she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. The sound of my name on her lips broke me. The disguise fell away. The Mr. John charade crumbled into dust. "Zuri," I whispered. "I didn't think you would recognize me." "I would recognize your shadow in the dark," she hissed, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and weakness. "I would recognize the sound of your breathing. How dare you? How dare you come here?" "I didn't know," I pleaded, stepping closer to the bed. "Zuri, I swear to God. I didn't know about Amani. I didn't know you were sick." "You didn't know?" She tried to sit up, but her body betrayed her and she fell back against the pillows, gasping. "You didn't know because you didn't care. You ran, Jabali. You ran like a thief in the night." "I wanted to build something," I said, my voice rising, desperate to explain the unexplainable. "I wanted to be worthy of you. I was poor, Zuri. I had nothing to offer you but dreams. I came here to make a fortune so I could come back a king." "A king?" She laughed, a wet, rattling sound that tore at my heart. "You left a king, Jabali. You left a man who was loved. You came back a stranger. A stranger who sends his own daughter to scrub floors." "I didn't know she was my daughter." I choked out. "I only found out today. I saw her yesterday in the rain. I felt a pull." "Zuri, my mother, she intercepted your letters. She told me nothing." Zuri's face hardened. "Your mother?" "Yes, that woman. She wrote to me. She told me I was dirt. She told me if I ever came near you, she would have me arrested." I didn't know, I wept, the tears finally spilling over. She lied to me too. She robbed us, Zuri. She robbed me of you. Of Amani. And now. Zuri glared at me. Now you show up when I am halfway to the grave? To do what? To buy your conscience clean? Is that what this money is? Is that what the Mrs. Kinyanjui lie is? You think you can pay for 20 years of silence with a check? I want to save you, I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled it away as if I were venomous. Zuri, I have money now. Real money. I can fly you to India, to London. I can get you the best kidney specialists in the world. I can fix this. You can't fix time, Jabali, she cried out. The monitor beside her began to beep faster. Beep, beep, beep. Please, I begged. Let me help. For Amani's sake. She needs her mother. She needs a father. Zuri retorted. But she doesn't have one. She has a memory of a ghost. And I prefer the ghost to you. The ghost didn't lie to her face. I will be a father to her now. I promise. No, Zuri shook her head, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. You will not buy her. You will not turn her into one of your possessions. You leave, Jabali. You take your money and you leave. I can't leave you here to die. I would rather die with my dignity than live on your charity, she spat the words out. Get out. Zuri. Get out, she screamed, summoning the last of her strength. The scream triggered the machine. The alarm went from a rhythmic beep to a solid, high-pitched tone. Her body arched, her eyes rolling back in her head. She began to convulse. Mama? Amani was running down the aisle, a nurse trailing behind her. What did you do? Amani screamed at me as she reached the bed. What did you say to her? I stepped back, my hands shaking. The nurse shoved me aside. Code blue. Doctor. We need a doctor here. She's crashing. More nurses swarmed the bed. They pulled the curtain around, blocking my view. I heard the sounds of panic, fabric ripping, orders being shouted, the hiss of oxygen. Clear. Shocking. Thump. I stood outside the curtain, paralyzed. Amani was on her knees, wailing, her hands gripping the metal rail of the bed frame. Mama. Please don't go. Mama. I looked at my hands. They were the hands that had signed million-dollar contracts. Hands that had built an empire. And now they hung useless at my sides. I had come to save her and I had killed her. The high-pitched whine of the monitor continued. It didn't stop. A doctor rushed past me, ripping the curtain open. I saw a glimpse of Zuri's face. It was still. Terrifyingly still. No pulse, the doctor barked. Again. Charged to 200. I couldn't watch. I backed away, my back hitting the cold wall of the ward. I slid down until I was crouching on the floor, covering my ears to shut out the sound of the machine that was measuring the end of my world. Amani turned and saw me. Her eyes were no longer filled with gratitude. They were filled with a confusion that was rapidly hardening into hatred. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Who are you? She screamed over the chaos. You are not a driver. Who are you? The monitor flatlined. A long, singular, unending tone filled the room. The E of the flatlining monitor was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping. It didn't just pierce the silence, it shredded it, leaving behind a vacuum where all hope used to live. I didn't move. I was still crouched by the cold wall, my gold cufflinks reflecting the frantic light of the emergency team. My mind was empty, a sudden, desolate plain where the only living thing was the monstrous realization. I broke her. I walked in here to save a ghost from my past, and instead, I had killed her with the sheer, crushing weight of my presence and my lies. Amani was still wailing, clinging to the bedside rail on the other side of the pulled curtain. Then a strong hand gripped my arm. Outside. Now. It was a large nurse, her face a mask of weary professionalism. She hauled me up by the elbow, her grip surprisingly strong. I offered no resistance. I was a puppet, my strings cut. She shoved me out of the ward doors into the main corridor. You caused this, the nurse snapped, pointing an accusing finger at my chest. She was stable. What did you say to that woman? She nearly tore out her own drip. I could only stare at her, my mouth dry. I told her the truth. The truth is for God, not for a patient in renal failure. Now stay out here. She slammed the ward doors shut. Moments later, a junior doctor emerged, pulling Amani with him. Amani wasn't wailing anymore. She was silent, her body rigid, her eyes fixed on the closed doors. She was in shock, a quiet, terrifying kind of grief. The doctor guided her into a small, windowless consultation room just down the hall. I followed them, my expensive Italian shoes silent on the worn floor. The room contained 2 plastic chairs, a rickety wooden desk and a wall calendar stuck on last year. It was a space designed for bad news. The doctor gave Amani a cup of lukewarm water and told her to wait. He looked at me, a tall man in a navy suit, and his suspicion was clear. "Are you family?" he asked me. "Yes," I managed to say. "Close family." He sighed. "Wait here. We are doing everything we can. I'll be back." He left, pulling the door almost shut. The silence that followed was worse than the flatline. It was a dense, suffocating silence, broken only by Amani's shallow, ragged breathing. She sat in one of the plastic chairs, her shoulders hunched. She didn't look at me. She stared at the wall. I walked over and sat in the chair opposite her. I felt exposed, stripped of my billions and my title. I was just a failed man. "Amani," I started, my voice a painful rasp. She flinched at the sound of her name. Then very slowly she turned her head. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, but the shock was draining away, replaced by an icy volcanic fury. "Mr. John," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You told Mama the truth. Now you tell me. And don't you dare give me another lie." She pointed a trembling finger at my suit. "My mother is dying because of what you said. You are not a driver. Amani is your driver. You have the hands of a soft man. Who are you? And what did you do to my mother that made her choose to die rather than talk to you?" The dam broke. There was nowhere left to hide. The consequences of my 20 years of cowardice had finally caught up to me, standing in this cold, sad room, staring into the eyes of the one person who mattered. "My name is not John," I confessed, my head bowing slightly. "My full name is Jabali Mwangi." Her eyes widened, but she showed no recognition of the name. It meant nothing to her, which was a relief and a further indictment. My empire didn't reach the slums. "I am the owner of Prism Tower," I continued, speaking slowly, deliberately, forcing the painful words out. "I own the car you were in. I am the man that the world calls a titan. Amani blinked once. She registered the shock, but her question remained, "Why?" "The money I gave you was not from Mrs. Kinyanjui," I said. "It was from me. And that lie was necessary because your mother knows who I am. She knows the truth." I took a shaky breath, preparing for the final blow. "Zuri Hassan and I were together in Mombasa. 20 years ago. We were in love, Amani. When I left, I was terrified of being poor. I was afraid I couldn't provide for her, so I came to Nairobi to make a fortune. I intended to send for her. But I became greedy. And I cut her out of my life." I pushed my chair back, stood and walked to the wall, turning to face her. The distance was unbearable, yet necessary. "I did not know about you," I said, the words catching in my throat. "My mother, God forgive her soul, intercepted the letters Zuri sent me. She lied to Zuri, telling her I wanted her gone. She lied to me, hiding your existence. She was protecting my wealth, but she was destroying my life." Amani stared at me, unmoving. The realization was crawling across her face, slow and agonizing like a disease. The color drained from her cheeks until she was the color of the pale green walls. 19 years ago, I whispered, pointing to her. 19 years ago, Zuri gave birth to you. I did the math last night. The date fits. The location fits. The resemblance to my mother, it fits. Amani, I finished, the truth finally fully spoken. I'm not your boss. I'm not the driver. I am your father. The silence returned, but this time it was pregnant with thunder. Amani didn't cry. She didn't scream. She did something far more devastating. She laughed. It was a high-pitched, hysterical sound that was broken in the middle. "My father," she repeated, the word a poison on her tongue. "The ghost. The man who wanted to fly." She stood up, her small body trembling with a power I had never seen. She walked towards me, her eyes burning with righteous fury. She was not the desperate beggar anymore. She was my daughter, inheriting Zuri's formidable pride. "You saw me begging for a job," she choked out, her voice now a low snarl. "You saw me in the mud. I told you my mother was dying. I told you my father left us. And you sat there, Mr. Titan, and you lied to me. You made me tell my mother that her bastard child had to beg a stranger for shillings to pay a debt you created." "I am sorry," I pleaded. "I wanted to help. I panicked." "You panicked?" She spat the words. "I panic when I don't eat for 3 days. You panic when your pride is challenged. You are a monster, Jabali. You are worse than the disease. You are a cancer." She raised her hand and slapped me. It was a small, frail hand, but the blow was immense. It echoed in the small room, the first time in 20 years anyone had dared touch me in anger. The sting was nothing compared to the pain in my soul. I deserved it. I stood still, letting the red mark bloom on my cheek. "I will not take your money," she said, her voice shaking with the finality of a curse. "You leave this hospital. You leave Nairobi. You are dead to us. If my mother dies, I will find you, and I will stand on your grave and spit." The door of the consultation room clicked open. The doctor was back. He looked tired, his gaze heavy. He closed the door gently behind him. "Amani," he said, his tone professional but soft. "I need to speak to the next of kin. We have stabilized her, for now. But we need to make some decisions." He looked from Amani to me, sensing the monumental storm that had just occurred. "The good news is she's back," the doctor said, rubbing the back of his neck. "But the episode was severe. She has suffered a cardiac event. Her heart is failing and her kidneys are fully shut down. We have run out of options here." He looked directly at Amani, then at me. "We can keep her comfortable," the doctor continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Or, there is a new clinical trial in Johannesburg. It involves a simultaneous kidney-heart transplant. It's radical, it's dangerous, and it costs everything you own." He paused, letting the immense weight of the price settle in the silence. "She has less than 48 hours left in her." The word 48 landed in the small, cold room like a heavy stone, echoing the finality of Zuri's prognosis. 48 hours. 2 days. The time it took me to close a minor deal or fly to London and back. Now, it was the entire remaining lifespan of the woman I loved and the mother of the daughter I had just found. I straightened my jacket, the instinctive reflex of the businessman taking over the panic of the father. I needed facts. Facts I could manipulate. "Doctor," I said, stepping forward, pushing past Amani. She was still standing, paralyzed by her sudden grief and overwhelming hatred for me. "What are the logistics of this clinical trial in Johannesburg? Cost, timing, availability?" The doctor, a kind man named Mutua, looked relieved to be dealing with a rational mind, even one wearing the fresh mark of a slap. "The facility is in Sandton," Dr. Mutua explained, speaking quickly. "Professor van der Merwe's team. They specialize in multi-organ failure. The cost is astronomical, Mr. Mwangi. We're talking about a minimum of 180 million shillings for the transplant alone, plus evacuation, specialized transport, donor mobilization, and aftercare. Realistically, budget for 250 million shillings liquid cash within the next 24 hours. 250 million shillings. About $2 million US. It was a staggering sum, the kind of money that could build schools or entire clinics. For Jabali Mwangi, the amount itself was trivial, a drop in the ocean. But the requirement for liquid cash and immediate action was the challenge. My wealth was tied up in assets, in logistics companies, in property deeds. I couldn't just walk to the bank and withdraw the entire amount. "The money is not the issue," I said flatly, pulling out my phone. My personal security detail, still outside the main K&H entrance, was already fielding calls about my location. "Can you provide the initial contact details for van der Merwe's office?" "I have them here." Dr. Mutua quickly scribbled a number on a prescription pad. I looked at Amani. She hadn't moved. She was watching me, her eyes tracking the movement of my gold pen, the rapid dialing on my phone. "Amani," I said, my voice low and urgent. "We need to move her. Now. She needs to be on a specialized flight tonight." She finally moved. She turned to me, her lips curling in disgust. "No," she said, the single word cutting through the sterile silence. "She stays here. Amani, don't be foolish. She will die here. I can save her." "You will not save her," Amani countered, her voice rising in passion. "You will not save her to buy me. She hates you. She hates what you are. You think you can use your money to erase 19 years of poverty and lies? You think you can pay God for more time? I would rather she die with her pride intact than owe you another breath." "Pride?" I exploded, slamming my hand down on the wooden desk, making the prescription pad jump. "Is that what you call it? Her heart is stopping. Her blood is poisoned. You think that is pride? That is suicide, Amani. That is the kind of moral vanity that kills people." "It is justice," she screamed, tears finally flowing, but they were tears of rage, not sorrow. "Your presence made her collapse. Your money caused us misery. She told you to get out. We don't want your help. You might not want it, but she needs it." I retaliated. "Look at me. I am a terrible man, Amani. I am a terrible father. But I am the only chance your mother has. You can hate me for the rest of your life, but you will not let your mother die because of my past. I grabbed the phone and stepped away, calling my chief financial officer, Bernard. I paced the hallway, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, switching into the cold, clinical language of finance. Bernard, listen carefully. I need 250 million shillings liquid. Wire transfer capability within 4 hours. Yes, 4 hours. I don't care about the market value right now. Sell the transport and logistics division. Yes. The whole unit. Use the proceeds. I'm authorizing the emergency sale now. It's non-negotiable. I need the cash cleared for a medical transfer to Johannesburg. Don't ask questions. Just execute. The transport and logistics division, my first company, the one I had built from a single second-hand Matata 30 years ago, was gone. Liquidated in less than 90 seconds. I hung up, my hands shaking. The price of redemption was not just money, it was the foundation of my empire. I turned back to the room. Dr. Mutua was trying to calm Amani, who was now sobbing uncontrollably. I have mobilized the funds, I announced, walking back into the room. The medical charter is being prepared in Wilson Airport. I need a medical summary for Professor van der Merwe. Now. Dr. Mutua looked at Amani, helpless. Amani, your mother is medically unstable. We need your consent for the release of her records and the transfer. Amani lifted her tear-streaked face. She pointed at me, her finger trembling. He is not family. He is nothing. I am her next of kin. And I say no. She will not leave this place with him. I felt a terrifying despair. Her dignity, her stubborn pride, was going to kill Zuri. I walked over to the desk and pulled out my wallet. I took out my national ID card, my passport, and my most important document, a notarized and verified birth certificate of my own. I slammed them down onto the desk. Dr. Mutua, I said, my voice heavy with finality, run these through the system. You will find that I am the majority shareholder of the Jabali Mwangi group. And you will also find a medical record from the late Mrs. Jabali Mwangi, documenting her long illness. I looked directly at Amani, my eyes demanding that she witness my last brutal move. Zuri Hassan's mother, before she died, wrote a letter to a legal clinic in Mombasa, identifying me as the father and requesting that in case of a medical emergency, I be contacted as the final decision maker. I had Kip2 secure those documents last night. It was a cold, calculated lie. Kip2 had mentioned nothing of the sort. But my investigator was good. If I told him to retroactively find or manufacture such a document, he would. I was betting Zuri's own mother, driven by tradition, might have left some paper trail. More importantly, I was betting Dr. Mutua wouldn't take the time to verify the validity of the documents while his patient was on the clock. This man, I said, pointing at myself, is the biological father. By law and tradition, I have the final say on the life-saving treatment of Zuri Hassan, even if Amani, in her grief, refuses. Dr. Mutua, you have your legal basis. Do your job. Prepare the transfer. We leave in 3 hours. Dr. Mutua, faced with a hysterical daughter, a famous billionaire, and a stack of official-looking documents, wilted. Understood, Mr. Mwangi. I will prepare the files. He hurried out. Amani was staring at the documents, her eyes wide with betrayal. She realized I was using my power, my law, and my money to seize control. You are evil, she whispered, her voice broken. You are using the law to steal my mother. I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look into my eyes. I am using the law to keep her alive. You can hate me, Amani, but you will have your mother. And I promise you this, I will sit outside her door in Johannesburg. I will pay every shilling. And if she wakes up and refuses to see me, I will leave. I will go back to Nairobi and never bother you again. But I will not let her die because of my own selfishness 20 years ago, and I will not let her die because of yours today. Now you can come with me or you can stay here and watch the machine take her last breath. Your choice. I released her and walked to the door. I had given my daughter the hardest choice a child could ever face. As I opened the door, ready to walk out, Amani spoke, her voice just above a plea. If she dies, Jabali, she said, using my name like a shard of glass, I will come back to Nairobi. And I will burn your tower to the ground. I didn't turn around. Understood. I stepped into the hallway and called Bernard. The sale must be finalized by midnight. And Bernard, I need a second authorization. I am establishing an irrevocable trust fund. For Amani. 200 million shillings. Wire it immediately upon my return. I want her taken care of, whether she forgives me or not. I had saved Zuri's life, but I had guaranteed the hatred of my daughter. Now I had to get them both to Johannesburg. Chapter 6. The race from Kenyatta National Hospital to Wilson Airport felt like a desperate, final scene in a movie. My police escort, paid for by a series of frantic calls and wire transfers, cut through the late-night Nairobi traffic, sirens wailing a desperate song of urgency. Zuri was encased in a mobile intensive care unit, a high-tech stretcher covered in cables and tubes. I watched as the medical team, hired from a private emergency service, worked with cold, focused efficiency. Amani was a silent shadow, walking beside her mother's gurney, her hand never leaving Zuri's shoulder. She refused to acknowledge my existence. At Wilson Airport, the difference between my world and hers was starkly apparent. The sleek, white Bombardier Global 6000 was waiting, engines already running, the interior transformed into a flying surgical suite. I watched Amani board the plane. She looked at the polished steps, the luxury vinyl, and the specialized life support equipment with an expression that conveyed not awe but deep, moral repugnance. This wealth, which was now saving her mother, was the very thing that had doomed her for 19 years. I followed her onto the plane, shedding my suit jacket. The flight was harrowing. The cabin was dominated by the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator and the relentless beep-beep-beep of the cardiac monitors. Amani sat bolted to the seat next to Zuri's head, pale and watchful. I sat across the aisle, banished to the distance of a mere 4 feet. The silence between us was the heaviest burden I have ever carried. I tried once to offer her a bottle of water. "Amani, you need to hydrate." She didn't even look at me. She just curled her lip and whispered, so low the medical team couldn't hear, "If you speak to me, I will wake my mother up and tell her everything." Her threat was a sharp knife. I immediately retreated into my internal world, where I wrestled with the decisions I had made in the last 12 hours. The sale of the Transport and Logistics Division, my oldest, most profitable asset, was already finalized. I felt a phantom ache in my chest, a deep sense of loss, but then I looked at Zuri, and the ache was replaced by a grim resolve. I had traded steel for flesh. I spent the 7 hours of the flight staring at the rise and fall of Zuri's chest, praying to a God I hadn't acknowledged in 2 decades. In the small, fleeting moments when my eyes met Amani's, I saw only the reflection of Zuri's rage, perfectly preserved in her daughter's gaze. We landed at Lanseria International Airport in Johannesburg just before dawn. The air was crisp, cold, and efficient. We were immediately met by a team from the medical center, a different level of precision entirely. We were rushed to the Santon Mediclinic, a vast, modern fortress of glass and steel. Within 30 minutes, I was standing in the immaculate office of Professor Hendrik van der Merwe. He was a tall man in his late 60s, with startling blue eyes and a severe, white beard that gave him the air of a grim executioner. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Mwangi," he stated, not offering his hand, "your bank transfer is confirmed. However, money cannot buy time or guarantee a donor organ, though your emergency funds expedite mobilization." I sat rigidly, Amani standing defiantly behind my chair. "The patient, Zuri Hassan, is critical," van der Merwe continued, flipping through Zuri's file. "Simultaneous heart-kidney failure. The cardiac event last night has damaged the myocardium further. The trial is risky. We are talking about a 50% mortality rate in the first year, even if the transplant is successful." "I am aware of the risk," I said, my voice steady. "But without it she has 48 hours. 50% is better than 0. "Indeed," he conceded. "But you must understand the complexity. The primary challenge is not the surgery, it is the rejection. Her immune system is already compromised. And we must move quickly. We have identified a potential donor pair. A young woman, local, fatally injured in a motor vehicle accident last night. Perfect blood and tissue match. We have a window of 6 hours to secure the organs and begin preparation." This was it. The point of no return. "Proceed," I ordered. Van der Merwe leaned back, steepling his fingers. His eyes flickered to Amani, then back to me. "Before we proceed, Mr. Mwangi, there is the matter of ethical consent. Due to the high risk of catastrophic rejection, we have developed a highly experimental immunosuppressive protocol. It is not approved for general use. It is a biological agent we call A12. "What does it do?" "It radically suppresses the immune response," he explained, clinical and detached. "It is highly effective, almost guaranteeing initial acceptance. However, if it fails or if the patient suffers a systemic viral infection post-operation, the immune system may collapse completely. There is no fallback. Failure means death within days, Mr. Mwangi. A swift, untreatable death." He placed a sheaf of papers, thick with legalese, on the desk. You are the legal guardian assuming financial and ethical responsibility. You must sign this waiver, acknowledging the risk of the A12 protocol. I picked up the pen. My hand hesitated over the signature line. I was signing an admission that if she survived the surgery, I might still be responsible for her sudden, irreversible demise. Wait. Amani stepped forward, leaning over my shoulder. What is this? You are giving them permission to kill her? I am giving them permission to save her, Amani, I countered, looking up at her. This is the best chance. No, she said, her voice shaking with fear. You are not her next of kin. I refuse to sign anything experimental. Vander Merwe cleared his throat. Ms. Hassan, your father has provided documentation confirming his role as the financial guarantor and authorized decision-maker in the event of life or death treatment, overriding standard kin procedure due to the extreme circumstances. Amani stared at me, her eyes wet with fresh tears. You planned this. You stole my right to decide. I stole your right to commit suicide by pride, I countered, my voice low and firm. I put the pen to the paper. But before I could scrawl my signature, Vander Merwe added one last chilling detail. Mr. Mwangi, the professor said, leaning in. There is one further, unavoidable hurdle. Due to the rapid mobilization, the surgical team is short one highly specialized technician trained in the A12 delivery process. We are flying someone in, but they will not arrive for 8 hours. We cannot wait that long or the organs will be compromised. The patient must be on the table in 4 hours. He paused, letting the impossible problem hang in the air. However, he continued, looking directly at Amani, your mother's medical file indicated that Amani, her daughter, was enrolled in a specialized medical college in Nairobi 2 years ago before dropping out. She completed the basic courses in sterile field and pharmacology, with excellent marks. If we can get her to assist the lead technician immediately, under strict supervision, we can proceed on time. We need her in the operating theater. Is she willing to risk it? Amani looked from the professor to the document, then to me. Her mother's life now depended not just on my money, but on Amani's skill and courage. The surgery must be performed now, I said. Amani, if you don't step up, we lose the donor. Amani stared at the signature line on the waiver, my betrayal etched in ink, then at the professor's implacable face. Her own skill, her own past ambition, was the only thing that could save Zuri from the clock. I will do it, Amani said, her voice barely a whisper but firm. I will do the job. But I do not want him, she pointed at me, in the room. And I will not sign that waiver. He will. I signed the waiver. The fate of Zuri Hassan was sealed, not by love or by money, but by a forced, fragile alliance between the billionaire and the daughter who hated him. Chapter 7. The atmosphere in the Santon Medi Clinic was the opposite of the chaos at KNH. It was a sterile, unforgiving precision. Everything was steel, glass, and hushed efficiency. Zuri was moved from the trauma bay into the preoperative holding area. The anesthesiologist, a woman with kind eyes but firm hands, worked swiftly, administering the initial sedation. Amani had been whisked away. I watched her go, a slight figure marching toward the scrub rooms, wearing a borrowed set of scrubs that were still too large for her face a mask of determined terror. I was allowed 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes to say goodbye, potentially forever. I stood beside Zuri's gurney. Her face, though drawn, had softened under the sedation. She looked peaceful, no trace of the fire and fury that had erupted less than 12 hours ago. The only indication of the gravity of the situation was the rapid, shallow motion of her chest and the rhythmic beep of the pulse oximeter. I reached out and gently took her hand. It was cold, frail, and almost weightless in mine. I brought it to my lips, kissing her knuckles. Zuri, I whispered, my voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I should never have left you. I should have trusted my heart more than my ambition. I stroked her forehead, pushing back a loose strand of hair. I know you can't hear me, but listen. I know about Mama. I know my own mother built this lie between us. She won. She cost us 2 decades. But she will not win this. She will not take you from Amani. And she will not take you from me. My tears fell onto her hand, hot and quick. I signed the papers, Zuri. I took the responsibility. It's on me. If you live, you owe me nothing. You never have to see me again. But if you die, it won't be because I stood still. Please, my love. Fight for Amani. Fight for me. The anesthesiologist signaled time was up. They began to wheel the gurney away toward the massive stainless steel doors of the operating theater. I released her hand, the sudden loss of contact sending a jolt of raw panic through me. I was led to a small, private viewing room adjacent to the surgical corridor. It was equipped with a large glass window looking down into the OR and a monitor displaying Zuri's real-time vitals. I was given a headset to listen in on the surgical team's communications. This was my billion-rand cage. I could buy the world, but all I could do now was sit and listen. A few minutes later, Amani walked past the viewing window, already inside the sterile zone. She was wearing a full blue surgical gown, a cap covering her hair, and a mask hiding everything but her eyes. Those eyes, though focused on the task, were frantic, searching. I tapped on the thick glass. She saw me. I held up my hand, palm out, a gesture of peace and desperate connection. She stopped. She didn't respond to the gesture. She held my gaze for a moment, and in her eyes, I saw the cold, clear condition of our agreement. Do not confuse this with love. She then turned her back on me and entered the main theater. The red light above the OR door illuminated. Surgery in progress. I put on the headset. The voices were crisp, accented, and intensely professional. Time of incision, 9:37, Professor Vander Merwe's voice stated calmly. Vitals holding, Professor, replied the anesthesiologist. I sat back, sinking into the leather chair, the most comfortable chair in the entire clinic, and felt utterly helpless. I was the richest man in the room, but my net worth meant nothing. Everything was in the hands of a surgeon I barely knew and a daughter who was acting on adrenaline and basic training. The first hour was a blur of technical jargon. They opened her up. They exposed the damage. The heart, weakened by the failed kidneys, was barely pumping. Heart is unstable, Professor, the anesthesiologist reported. Stay focused. We need to get this kidney out first. The heart team is on standby. I stared at the monitor. The line tracing her heartbeat danced precariously, spiking and dipping. My thoughts drifted back to the moment I signed the waiver, signing away my entire beginning, my first company, to pay for this moment. I traded 20 years of regret for a 50% chance at tomorrow. Then, just as the team was preparing to clamp the major vessels leading to the failed kidney, the voice of the anesthesiologist sharpened. Professor. Massive systolic drop. Blood pressure is collapsing. The monitor beside me began to wail an urgent, repetitive alarm, a desperate, high-pitched bleeding that superseded the rhythm of my own heart. Damn it. She's crashing. Vander Merwe roared, his composure finally breaking. Vascular team, stabilize immediately. We're losing her on the table. Through the glass, I saw the frantic movement below. Everyone was shouting. The sheer, overwhelming fear that had stalked me since I saw Zuri in the rain was here, now, staring me down. Vitals too low to proceed, Professor. We are losing the window. I gripped the arms of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. No, not now. Not after all this. After what felt like an eternity, the chaos subsided slightly. BP stabilized at 70/50ths. Barely. We are running out of time, Professor. The donor organs are here, the anesthesiologist stated. All right, Vander Merwe's voice was strained but back under control. We have one shot. We proceed with the immunosuppressant immediately. We need maximum suppression before we introduce the new heart. This was the moment. The A12 protocol. The extreme risk I had signed for. Technician Hassan. Vander Merwe barked. Prep the A12. Delivery system ready? Ms. Hassan, this must be perfect. One chance. Are you ready? Amani's voice, though slightly muffled by the mask, cut through the tension. It was clear, professional, and terrifyingly young. Ready, Professor. Dosing calculated and verified. I watched below, unable to breathe. My daughter, the girl who had begged on the streets for shillings, was holding the life of her mother, my love, in her hands. Her success or failure was now measured in milligrams, not millions. Proceed, Technician Hassan, the professor commanded. I saw Amani lean over the table, her hands steady, her eyes fixed on the delivery system. I was helpless, forced to watch the woman I loved risk her life on the expertise of the daughter who loathed me. Mungawangu. My God. The only sound in the room was the desperate, fragile beat of Zuri's heart and Amani's steady count. I watched, knowing that if she failed this one step, Zuri's death would be irreversible, and Amani would be lost to me forever. The silence in the operating theater was absolute, broken only by the sharp, focused command of Professor Vander Merwe. Dose administered. I watched from the viewing gallery as Amani, still and steady in her surgical gown, withdrew the needle. Her hands, which had begged for a cleaning job less than 2 days ago, had just delivered the most powerful experimental drug known to modern medicine. The fate of Zuri Hassan and the price of my soul was now circulating in her veins. Time of A12 delivery, 10:15, announced the anesthesiologist. Vitals stabilized. Begin perfusion, Vander Merwe ordered, his voice clipped and efficient. Heart team, prepare for extraction. Technician Hassan, you are clear to step back. Amani did not look away from the surgical field, not even when she took a mandated, shaky step back. She stood there, sentinel, as the heart team moved in. The next 6 hours were an agonizing blur. I watched, helpless, as Zuri's old, failing heart was lifted from her body, a moment of terrifying emptiness, followed by the delicate placement of the new one. Then the kidney. Hours of meticulous stitching, wiring, and connecting. My exhaustion was total, but I never left the chair. I watched the rise and fall of the lines on the monitor, my entire billion-shilling empire reduced to a single fragile wave on a screen. Finally, at 4:30 p.m., after the longest and most expensive day of my life, Vander Merwe stepped back from the table. Close her up, he said, pulling off his surgical mask. He looked up at the viewing gallery, his face grim yet satisfied. The transplant is successful. Both organs are viable. The A12 is circulating. The next 48 hours are critical, but we have won the first battle, Mr. Mwangi. The overwhelming flood of relief hit me like a physical wave. I dropped my head into my hands and wept. The Iron Man had broken, not through failure, but through survival. Zuri was transferred to the highly restricted ICU. Amani emerged from the scrub area an hour later. She was utterly exhausted, leaning against the wall, sipping tea from a polystyrene cup. The scrubs were gone, she was back in her clean, borrowed clothes. She had saved her mother. I walked over to her. I didn't reach out. I respected the distance. You saved her life, Amani, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You were brilliant. I am proud of you. Amani looked at me. Her exhaustion had stripped away the rage, leaving behind a cold, desolate clarity. I didn't do it for you, she said, her voice hollow. I did it for Mama. You only signed the paper. I put my hands inside the sterile field and did the job. The debt is settled, Jabali. I nodded. I accepted her terms. The money is settled too, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out a document, the trust fund papers signed and sealed. I have established an irrevocable trust fund for you. 200 million shillings. It's yours, deposited under Amani Hassan. For your medical school. For your future. She didn't take the paper. She just looked at the logo of my company on the envelope. I don't want your money, she said quietly. I told you I will not be bought. I will take care of my mother. I will earn the money myself. Amani, don't be a fool. You need this. I need my dignity, she interrupted, meeting my gaze. Something you have never valued. Take your money. If I need it for Mama, I will ask you. And I will pay you back every shilling. Her integrity was monumental, a force stronger than my billions. I put the papers away. She was her mother's daughter, through and through. Understood, I said. Then I will honor the rest of my promise. I will leave. I reached for my phone, already dialing Amani to charter a flight back to Nairobi. It was time for the ghost to disappear again. If she wakes up and she asks for me, you can tell her everything, I said, turning away. But if she doesn't, just tell her the kind woman, Mrs. Kinyanjui, made a good choice. I took 3 steps toward the exit of the waiting area. 3 steps toward my lonely, empty empire. Jabali. Amani's voice stopped me. I turned back. She was still leaning against the wall, but her expression had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, new fear. I saw her eyes move, Amani whispered, pointing towards the restricted ICU door. She's waking up. We both rushed to the glass partition overlooking Zuri's bed. Zuri's eyelids were fluttering. Slowly, painfully, she opened her eyes. Amani gasped and pressed her hands against the glass. Mama. Mama, you're awake. Zuri's eyes, weak and hazy, moved slowly, finally focusing on Amani. A small, miraculous smile touched her lips. Amani. She whispered through the oxygen mask. My brave girl. Then Zuri's gaze shifted. She saw me standing beside Amani, staring through the glass. The recognition was instant. But there was no rage. Only a profound, sorrowful calm. Jabali, she murmured, her voice barely audible. I stepped closer to the glass, my heart pounding, bracing for the final rejection. I'm sorry, Zuri, I mouthed through the glass, tears returning. I'm leaving now. I will pay for everything. Just be well. Zuri shook her head, a tiny, fragile movement. She raised a bandaged hand and beckoned, not toward Amani but toward me. A nurse, witnessing the moment, Open the ICU door just enough for Zuri to speak. Jabali, Zuri repeated, her eyes locked on mine. Don't leave. Relief flooded me. Zuri, I know what you did, she cut me off, her voice surprisingly strong. I heard you in the room. I heard you talking about the transplant. She looked straight at Amani, then back at me, her gaze filled with pity and a strange, cold sorrow that wasn't directed at me. You risked everything for me, Zuri whispered, a tremor passing through her body. But you didn't risk enough. Jabali, you have to leave now. Not because I hate you, but because Amani is not safe with you. Your biggest business rival, the one you think you beat out of the country 20 years ago, he is the one who funded the creation of that A12 drug. And the trial requires more than just money. Zuri took a shuddering breath, her eyes wide with panic. He wants the antidote, Jabali. And he thinks Amani is the key to getting it. The nurse rushed in, shooing us away as the monitors began to protest. The door clicked shut, leaving us standing in the cold hallway. Zuri was alive, but the truth was worse than death. My rival, the one I thought I crushed, was playing a deeper, darker game, and he had used my own daughter as the necessary technician in a scheme I couldn't comprehend. Amani looked at me, her eyes reflecting the terror in mine. She was no longer just my daughter. She was a pawn in an empire war she didn't know existed.